Hi, I'm the Texaco Tanker Man, and today I'll show how to disassemble and assess the condition of your Texaco tanker. In future videos, I'll go into the steps required to restore the tanker, but for now we'll start with finding out what we have to work with. Our subject today is my most recent find, which is actually in pretty good shape. I'll note right here that examples can be found from absolutely mint to so bad I wouldn't even buy it for spare parts, and everything in between. I'll cover some of the common issues here today. My first look tells me a few things. It's a mid-production tanker with the bright red hull and little tool wear on the hull. More about that later. All the masts except for the radar mast are broken off and missing. It's in need of a good bath. The white houses look pretty good, they can be pretty badly yellowed from UV exposure. There are no major broken parts, sometimes the decks or houses or even the hulls have been smashed. The rudder is broken off, the prop is damaged, and something funky is going on with the prop shaft, as it's hanging loose out the back. And from its weight, I can tell that there are batteries inside, which is usually a problem. All in all, it seems to be a great candidate for restoration. About the hull color, production started out with the dark red hull, as seen in this fine example. It's not obvious in the picture, but the hull is molded in a different color than the red decks, which is very realistic. Bottom paint is not the same as deck paint. Production changed at some point to the cheerier bright red, even though it is not a realistic color. Now we'll look at the tanker's 3 stickers. Early production used paper stickers that weren't water resistant, while later stickers are plasticky and long-lasting. But all of them are subject to abuse. On the bow, we have the flying Texaco star. This example is poorly placed and a little bit worn. I'd fix that with my new stickers. At the stern, the sticker looks better, but if I choose to repair the scratch paint I'll need to replace the sticker too. The stack sticker wraps around on itself, and it's common to have the overlapping edge peeling loose. Since this sticker is otherwise in good shape, I'll reglue the edge. Now let's check out the decks. First thing, they're dirty but they're all there and unbroken. We have the foredeck and the mid-house's boat deck, and wheelhouse decks. The main deck? And the aft house's boat and fiddly decks. What's a fiddly? It's a hatch, often near the stack, for access to the heavy equipment in the engine room. This boat's decks are cleanable, but sometimes you get a deck with something I call spotulism. This is permanent damage that I suspect is due to dust, humidity, and heat acting to suck plasticizer out of the plastic. No amount of washing or polishing removes it, and the only answer may be to paint the decks. What about the 2 houses? We have the mid-house and the aft house. Here they both look very nice, no breakage, and the plastic is still white. We'll just give them a nice cleaning. But frequently the houses have yellowed with age. The only solution I've found is painting them. Some folks swear by a process that uses hydrogen peroxide, but it hasn't worked for me on these parts. You can try sanding and polishing the surface, which can get through the yellow, but a lot of material must come off and it's hard to get to all the surfaces without damaging the crisp edges. Here we have a yellowed house on the left, the current house in the middle, and a painted house on the right. Time to check out the hull. I'm pretty happy with this example, it's free of major damage and blemishes. On the port side forward, we have some sloppy black paint marks from the factory. These can be buffed out. Aft, we see some abrasion marks around the curve of the bilge. The tanker was supported in its carton by a pair of cardboard inserts fore and aft, with the cut edge of the cardboard bearing on the hull. Most tankers show at least a little damage from their abrasive edges. There is also some evidence of mold wear. The gunnel, or upper edge of the hull, has little or no draft angle which leads to wear and galling of the mold. These wear marks transfer to every new part that comes off the mold. It's not too bad on this example, which is why I say it's a mid-production unit. Here's a later example that shows a lot more of the galling. And finally, an early example with no galling compared to the later unit. A quick look underneath, again we see no blemishes or damage, and both rollers are intact. The rollers are often broken from rough play. There is also a water entry port to the free-flooding ballast tank. We'll talk more about that later. Let's look at some of the deck detail. But first a little history. The North Dakota and her 4 sisters were known as drugstore tankers. They weren't the big crude carriers bringing oil from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia. Instead, they were like local delivery trucks, bringing all sorts of refined products from Texaco's Port Arthur refinery to the East Coast. The hull was divided into many compartments to handle this job, and there is even a dry goods compartment forward, serviced by a cargo hatch and cargo booms. Products were loaded from either side of the ship at the forward manifold, and then routed aft to the pump room, which is just forward of the engine room. From the pump room, the products were then moved forward again to the correct tank. Now each tank has its own vapor dome on deck, the little gray cylinders, where volatiles were collected and then routed to vent stacks in the forward and main masts. Many of these details are captured in the toy, which makes it more of a model than a simple toy. By the way, the 27-inch tanker accurately scales to 1/250th scale. There is a catwalk which allows crew to quickly move between the aft and mid houses. There is an anchor windlass forward, and bits for mooring lines at both ends. Here's a closer look at the loading manifold and the forward cargo booms. They're both in great shape. But sometimes they have issues. This manifold has several broken pipes, and the foremast is broken off in the cargo booms. This one looks like the broken stub is glued in. I may not be able to save it, because the hole has a complicated key shape, not a simple drilled hole. So much for the outside. Now let's see what's inside. You will need a few tools. I use a small straight chisel I found in a craft shop, a No. 1 Phillips screwdriver, and a small prying tool used with printed circuit boards. We need to remove a total of 10 screws holding the houses and decks in place. The first one is hidden under the anchor windlass. The windlass needs to be pried straight up, as it has an alignment pin that keeps you from twisting it out. I insert the chisel under a corner and carefully work the windlass loose. Once the windlass is out, you can get at the screw. This is a good time to check each screw for stripped threads in their plastic bosses down in the hull. Try tightening the screw, and if it is stripped it'll be obvious. But a couple other things to watch out for. First, if water has been left inside the hull, the screws may have rusted inside their bosses. The rust grows and locks the screw in place. I have had to cut and grind the heads off screws, which is tricky because it is easy to overheat the screw and melt the plastic deck. Secondly, if you find yellow corrosion on a screw, handle it carefully. Vintage plastics use plasticizers that contain lead. The lead leaches out and combines with the screw's chromium conversion coating to make lead chromate, which is a toxic bright yellow pigment. I offer replacement stainless steel screws that have the correct length and thread pitch. Now we'll find out what's going on with the batteries. 2 more screws and the mid-house comes off. It has springy electrical contacts, so you'll feel them lifting the house a bit, and they need to be compressed when reinstalling the house over batteries. And what a surprise! This boat not only has the original D cells from 1961, but they are free of leakage and corrosion. Frequently, cells that have been left in have leaked, leading to bad corrosion in the battery box. Pulling the cells out, we see they are marked 20 cents, which confirms their age. These ever-ready cells were included in the tanker's carton. We can also see that both electrical contacts and the 2 screws down in the bottom are uncorroded and in good condition. Also note that both cells are installed with the positive end up. It is a 1.5 volt system. In this example, someone reversed one cell, which led to a dead short. The old carbon cells don't put out a lot of current, so the owner likely didn't notice the short slowly cooking the plastic battery box, nor the leakage that followed. This one required a lot of work to repair. Let's get that aft house off to see what's up with the motor. One screw by the switch, and the house lifts right off. It just has a tab at the aft end. We can see that someone has been in here before to work on the motor, and they gave up and left it hanging there. It's not clear in the photo, but they also broke 2 of the 4 mounting pegs on the motor mount. The simple power switch is exposed. It just sits between 4 locating pegs. 4 more screws retain the main deck. Here we see the motor more clearly, along with the propeller shaft. With the deck off, I wiggled the wires where they are soldered onto the motor. As I suspected, one wire fell right off, and it is probably the only thing wrong with the motor. These cold solder joints are very common, and the wire needs to be properly soldered back on. To demonstrate the proper motor removal technique, I have reinstalled the motor. This small pry bar is perfect for removing the motor. Carefully work the mount out, bit by bit. Work both sides of the motor mount. The mount may not ease out, but it can break loose and jump. Restrain the mount so it only moves a little bit as you work around it, bit by bit. Take it easy to avoid breaking the pegs. The pegs can be repaired, but it's never as good as original. There, got it out again. The broken pegs can be drilled out with a 1/8 drill bit, or they can simply be pushed down to the bottom of the hole. I applied 1.5 volts directly to the terminals, and nothing. But I see that someone has pried up one of the brush retaining tabs, so this motor will need some more investigation. I usually get them running again. Moving on to the rudder and propeller shaft. This tanker's rudder is broken off, but if it was still present, it would need to be removed before the propeller shaft can be extracted. Removing the rudder requires nipping off the retainer. It's nearly impossible to pull the retainer off without damaging a good rudder. I use a small pair of sturdy diagonal cutters for this job. But in this case, the broken rudder shaft lifts right out. The plastic propeller is press-fit onto the shaft, and can usually be pulled off by hand. The shaft rides in a plastic bushing in the hull, which can be pushed out of the hull by hand. A black plastic tube is pressed onto the bushing, and is stuffed with grease. Not for lubrication so much, but to act as a dam against water intrusion around the shaft. A simple clear plastic tube couples the shaft to the motor. Here are all the propeller shaft parts. And here is my diagram showing how it all goes together. The diagram shows my serviceable rudder, which has a reusable collar to replace the retaining clip. Let's look at the ballast tank now. Real ships and toy ships both need weight, or ballast, to ride at a stable height in the water. But adding weight to a toy increases shipping costs, so our tanker has a free-flooding ballast tank to let a controlled amount of water into the hull. The water enters and drains through ports in the hull bottom, while air is vented through the hole in the center of the tank. Just put your tanker in the water, and it will fill up automatically. Pure genius. But there is a risk here. The tank lid is rarely glued on well. This is usually okay, as the water level stabilizes just below the lid. But if you add more fixed ballast to obtain a more realistic ride height, the water level will rise and the water will fill your hull until the tanker sinks. Are you interested in realistic running with radio control? I'll talk about that in a later video, but here are two hulls modified for our sea operation. On the left, the tank has been completely removed, and the water ports have been sealed with white plastic. On the right, only the tank lid has been removed, along with sealing the ports. In both cases, fixed ballast will be added. We're not done yet with disassembly. The houses need to come apart. Here's the aft house with my trusty pry tool. I will start by removing the two lifeboats. Pry under each end carefully and watch for it to jump out, as it won't break free easily. Be careful not to put stress on the fragile railing. Ah shucks, it broke anyway. No problem for me, I have spares and can even make replacements, but you don't want to do this. Instead, and just like with the decks, it is best to drill out the bosses from below. Use a 3/32 drill bit. Carefully support the house on blocks, and use a small punch to tap out the various parts. The first two bosses are for the stack, and are already open. Tap a little bit in each hole to work the stack out slowly. There, the stack is out safely. Repeat for the rest of the parts. Note that the forward peg of the gray fiddly hatch is in the long boss, which may be too long for your punch. I use a piece of 3/32 steel rod to reach in there. Now we can do the same job on the mid-house. The lifeboat bosses are on either side. You can drill these out, or just punch right through the thin plastic. For the contact, I desolder the wire to make handling easier, but I avoid removing the contact from its peg. The peg is very easy to break. If that happens, the part must be saved by installing a screw through the contact. Place the house on blocks and tap out two pegs retaining the upper wheelhouse. Bit by bit, take it easy. There, the wheelhouse is loose. Put the wheelhouse on blocks and tap out the radar mast. Only the round peg has a press fit. The radar mast is free. By the way, it is pretty unusual to find an intact radar mast like this. And here are all the parts for the mid-house. Here is the foredeck. And the underside of the foredeck. Start by simply tapping out the 3 cowl vents. Sometimes, parts can be pried out from above, but it is safest to drill out the bosses and tap out the pegs from below. Use a 3/32 drill bit. The vapor domes can sometimes be twisted right off. Other times, they need to be carefully pried off. You'll feel it give just a tiny bit, and then it can be lifted off easily. To remove the forward bits plate, work your chisel under the plate near the 3 bosses. Work around the part, bit by bit. All the 4 deck parts are removed. The main deck comes apart much like the foredeck. Here's the main deck from below, where we can see all the mounting bosses. The masts are usually broken off cleanly, but this 2-pin mount for the main mast looks suspicious. Sometimes, owners try to glue the broken masts back on, which can lock in the pegs and cause permanent damage to the deck. I hope that's not the case here. The aft bulkhead just lifts off. Note that its wings fit behind little pins at the side. Drill out all the bosses with a 3/32 drill bit, even if there is no part stuck in the boss. This will allow for easier removal of new parts in the future. Use your punch to tap out all the parts and any broken pegs. Carefully support the deck when doing this to avoid creating stress marks in the deck's plastic. Work around the 4 plates bosses to pry them up with your chisel. And here is the stripped down main deck, ready for washing. Almost done, but we still need to remove the rollers. Use the small pry tool for this job. There are 4 pegs inside. Work around each corner to break them free, bit by bit. Sometimes they just ease off, other times they break free suddenly. With the aft plate removed, we can see 2 ports into the ballast tank. This roller is unbroken and shows no wear, so it was likely never played with. Sometimes the rollers are broken, or the wheels are heavily scarred. Rollers can be replaced or repaired. Do the same for the forward roller. The 2 anchors can be tapped out from above. There are variations of this part, some are bare gray plastic, others are painted silver. Here's some anchor trivia. Besides the painted and unpainted variations, there were 3 different styles. One has little bumps on the bottom. The middle example has a little bar at the bottom. And on the right, a smooth round bottom. In all cases, the inner side has the ribs on the flukes. Here's the completely torn down tanker, ready for cleaning and restoration. I'll make more videos in the future to address the restoration techniques. For now, thanks for watching. See my eBay shop for replacement parts.